So we're glad you're with us. We're going to be talking about quality systems, a controlled approach to good clinical practice compliance. So when we go out and audit, I'm an auditor and a trainer, obviously. When we audit, we are looking at different entities. We're going to focus on the site level, but we're looking at different entities in terms of the quality systems that they have established to meet their regulatory obligations and whether or not those systems are functional. So I have been involved in research and clinical research for a long time. So I'm in research over 30 years and clinical research over 20. So my experience, as I said, as an auditor and a trainer is taking information that we see when we are out there and trying to work towards serviceable solutions to ensure compliance. We'll talk about the overview of sponsor and clinical investigator responsibilities for meeting the obligations under good clinical practice. We'll also look at the differences in quality systems and the active elements of a functional quality system and quality subsystems at a clinical investigator site. We'll talk about implementation of a quality system and how it can be used to help sponsors and investigators meet their requirements. We'll also look at how quality systems overlap with FDA guidance and look at recent non-compliance concerns when systems aren't functioning as they should. So first, we're going to talk about responsible parties. One of the things that we see in good clinical practice is we have a lot of overlap and redundancy in the regulatory requirements. We know that investigators are supposed to be compliant. We know that sponsors are supposed to promptly secure compliance from those non-compliant investigators. And if they are unable to do so, they are to terminate that investigator's participation and report that, control the product and report that to the FDA. IRBs are also supposed to assess the qualifications of an investigator and the fitness of their facilities, anything that might potentially introduce risk into that patient population. And they too are in a position to secure compliance, either by suspending or terminating non-compliant research. So we're all working together to work towards the goal of good clinical practice, which is ensuring that we get credible data from protected subjects. So good clinical practice is really a hierarchy of scientific and ethical standards for how we go about engaging a human subject population in testing an investigational product. And we're going to focus on products that are regulated by the Food and Drug Administration here in the U.S. So it is a compilation, certainly, but as I mentioned, it is a system of shared responsibility and mutual accountability. So sponsors, regulatory authorities, investigators, and IRBs, and those CROs are all working together to make sure that we get good data from protected people. Because ultimately, we are trying to get a product out there that the public can use, that is safe and that is effective. And the public has to trust that what we are doing is really working towards that goal. So we have that overlap and redundancy because it allows us, so I like to think, to build tensile strength into the safety net around our subjects and data. We're going to look at the FDA's regulations under Title 21 Code of Federal Regulations for industry-sponsored research, the requirements for sponsors and CROs where warranted. So under 21 CFR 312 for drugs and biologics, we have a transfer of regulatory obligations where a sponsor can transfer in writing regulatory obligations to a CRO who is willing to take those obligations on. And that CRO becomes a regulated entity. We do not have the same setup under 21 CFR 812 for medical devices, where the sponsor is responsible for everything that that CRO would do. But whether it is the sponsor or the CRO, sponsors are required to select qualified investigators and qualified monitors. And these monitors certainly would be selected and then go out and look for those investigators. And they have to provide investigators with all the information that they need to properly conduct that study. And that is before the study starts and during the course of the study as well, in terms of providing them feedback, helping them work towards compliance. And sponsors or CROs are responsible for ensuring proper monitoring. So this is not defined in the regulations as monitoring every 4 to 6 weeks or anything of that nature. It is ensuring that we are monitoring with enough frequency and depth to secure compliance from that investigator. Sponsors also have to make sure that IRB review and approval is appropriately obtained. So we look for documentation of IRB approval, but we also have to understand that just as we're going to discuss with clinical investigators having quality systems and quality subsystems, that IRBs and sponsors and CROs have them as well. We're going to look at that IRB not just for its approval letter, but we have to also assess that IRB's level of compliance.